Welcome to the Jake Feinberg Show, and what an honor it is to bring in a guy who has been creating musical vocabulary on the bandstand for about the last half century and continues to do so, searching for his individual sound and knowing that the journey of music is the forever journey. Mike Stern, welcome to the Jake Feinberg Show.
Thank you, bro. Appreciate you and your patience, because I know we've been hitting and missing in terms of doing this interview.
Well, no, I mean, all good things in all good time, my friend. You know, I wanted to ask you something about your own opinion. I remember interviewing Gene Perla, and he was talking about a conversation that he was having with Dave Liebman about the fact that as it relates to musical vocabulary or new musical vocabulary, everything's been done at this point. There's nowhere else to go other than bringing in instruments known in one genre, maybe into another. I mean, there's certain things you can do to adjust on the bandstand, but I wanted to ask you about how to create new musical vocabulary when technology has so far surpassed the human heart and humanity.
You know, to me, I'm not a big, huge one to just do something different for difference sake. You know what I mean?
Totally.
I mean, certain things are just, it's like saying, well, let's find a new way, to express love. It's been working for years, basically the same way, or the same few ways that people express love in all kinds of different ways, but nothing brand new. Like, wow, boy, that's interesting. You know what I mean? It's just not. It's not. And so music just transcends that. To me, sometimes the older stuff is just as fresh as it was made yesterday, or will be just as fresh 100 years from now. So that's the way I feel about that. I mean, and having said that, there's a whole lot of new, combinations of stuff. I mean, jazz itself it's a very oversimplified thing to say, but jazz is really, I've heard this said, and it makes sense. It's a combination of African rhythm and rhythms and European harmony. So it's kind of a fusion in right away. Even just what people refer to as just straight ahead jazz. It's kind of already a fusion. There's a ton of stuff happening now in terms of combining different elements from different, like, world music combined with jazz and more classical music combined. There's just a ton of new combinations, but the essence is the same. It's really about, to me, it's just a positive thing. So I can, sometimes more complex stuff, which I love a lot of times, but sometimes something incredibly simple can get my heart just as strong as something that's...
I love it. No, I love it, man. I mean, but were you in the combat zone in Boston gigging when you were at Berkeley?
There was some place called Michael's Jazz Club, and it was on Gainsborough Street, and a lot of students would play there. Then there was also I got a gig with Blood, Sweat, and Tears, so I didn't even finish Berkeley, and Pat Metheny actually recommended me for the audition.
Wow! And
then lo and behold, I got the gig. I was like 22 years old, so I was shocked to get the gig. But that place, Michael's Jazz Club, and then there was the Willow, and then there was a place called the Pooh's Pub.
Pooh's Pub,
yeah. There was another place called 1369. Those places, like the 55 Bar where I play in New York City, a little tiny place, I just, no one's going to get rich playing there, but it's really great to play at places like that where there's very little pressure, and you can just try some new stuff. That's what a lot of cats used to do, and that's how they learned. They used to be playing all the time. It wasn't, there are just sadly not as many places to play, and people are, learning kind of more in front of a computer or play along things, or sometimes playing, sometimes they'll get a gig or they'll try to keep a band together and just rehearse, and which is great. All of it's great, but there's nothing like actually doing the gig. So I'm hoping some of those little dungy places will somehow there'll be a renaissance of those places. But that's one of the things I wanted to talk to you about.
Man. Yeah.
Is this new CD? This is a good kind of segue. But this new CD I did with Harvey S. Harvey Schwartzman.
Sure.
He changed his name because there was a lot of confusion with some other bass player about the same spelling and all that stuff. So he had to change his name just to Harvey S. He simplified it. He's a badass bass player. Been playing with everybody. One of those guys that played with Dexter Gordon and all these.
I think he played with Eric Klaas too.
I think he played. Yeah. I'm pretty sure.
Yeah.
So he's played with everybody and recorded with a bunch of people. And Alan Dawson. So Harvey got this gig back he says it's 85, from 1985. I think it was later than that, personally. He got a gig maybe later in the 80s, but he got a gig at 1369 and said, "You want to do this?" It's with Alan Dawson, who was a famous educator
and drummer, yeah.
And an amazing drummer.
Yeah.
There's some stuff on YouTube with Alan Dawson and Sonny Rollins, man. It's swing so hard. It's ridiculous. So I went up there and I said, "Man, I'd love to play with Alan." I might have met him while I was at Berkeley, probably not, but knew of him, because he taught Tony Williams, all these people. He's kind of legendary, and had an amazing book that he wrote. And man, we hooked up just so good. It just was a natural kind of hookup between the three of us. And I was playing standards more in those days. So a couple of originals. There's one original of mine. It was just a blues, kind of an out blues head called Blues. That's on this CD. But somebody was in the audience and taped it, and with a DAT tape or something, and somehow it really sounds good.
That is so great, man.
Harvey rediscovered it, and now it's coming out on High Note Records on today, actually.
Wow.
And you should check it out, man. It's just one of those things with a trio. For me, I'm personally happy about it because I never documented in a live situation the trio stuff that I used to do a lot of. I made a record called Standards and Other Songs that has that in a studio setting with Al Foster and Jay Anderson was playing bass, and a couple other cats were on there, badass musicians. But basically it was a lot of trio playing that I did on that record. But I've never documented the live stuff, and we used to stretch a lot, And so this has that flavor and it was a really just one of those gigs that just somehow was recorded well out, for somehow, and it just sounds really good. And you'd be shocked to hear, because you wouldn't expect it to sound so good just from a DAT tape and a microphone.
When you listen
really
back
has
to
that live quality, huh?
When you listen back to your playing at that time, you were still pretty wet behind the ears. I mean, what stands out to you?
Man, I was actually shocked that it was, there was some stuff there that, it's amazing when you hear it back in certain technical things you used to do, and certain, I was probably playing more than I would normally play, but more notes than I would normally play now. But, sometimes you edit stuff and learn other stuff. And
sure.
More, but that's the amazing thing about music is you can be playing at any time once you get to a certain point of I guess a kind of what's the word, where you really know the language. You're fluent in the language. You not really know the language, but you start becoming fluent in the language of whatever you're playing. If it's rock, blues, jazz, whatever. Jazz is more intricate, I think, of a language. But so you become fluent. You some of those days, because of the nature of improvisation, even when you're just starting to kind of get a glimpse of the fluency, You know, you could be playing some stuff you hear back years later and say, damn, that was a good event. That was a good moment. So this has that like crazy, you know. And also the main thing and I love this about jazz in general, is when you're playing in a group setting, is the conversation between musicians. So, I'm always trying to hook up with a drummer. And not just in time-wise, that's very, always a priority for me, is try to make it feel good in the time. But also, response-wise, where the drummer kind of responds, or I'll respond to what he's playing, and the bass player, of course. Drummer first, and then bass player. It's like the heart and lungs of the band.
Absolutely.
And so that was going on in this setting. It was just like one of those things that didn't matter about my playing particularly. It's like the group conversation kind of, and the energy.
I want to make it clear for the audience. Was Dawson teaching there when you were at Berklee, and then the first time?
Yeah. And then he was still teaching there till he passed, or maybe he retired a few years.
And that was the first time you played with him. Was the recorded?
First time, and man, it hooked
Whoa,
up.
Man. Whoa.
And I turned on my distortion box. I basically started off. And then as we vamped or something, I would get more and more, with the rocking a little bit. And he was right there, man. The energy.
Unreal, dude. Unreal.
Alan Dawson used to be, suit and tie all the time. And there he was with his suit and tie and playing his fucking ass off and smiling and just enjoying. So I said, do you mind if I do, we do a little sound check. And sometimes I use this little thing and I turn it up. He said, whichever way you want to go, man. And he was really, I wish I had gotten an opportunity to do more, but I'm really happy that this is coming out today. And I would just...
Where can people find it? Where can people find it?
I guess it's on High Note Records. You can find it, I think it's called High Note.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm terrible at all this stuff, but it's under Harvey's name. It's not under my name. It's Harvey S. It's called Going For It. That's what it's called. Going For It. And it's featuring Mike Stern and Alan Dawson. Harvey S. Was bass. And he's the guy that found the recording, or found the guy that had recorded it, listened to it, edited it a little bit, and kind of mixed it as much as you can with a live. There's things you can do, to bring out this instrument or that instrument. It's kind of mastering after the fact, but there was not a lot that needed to be done. It just came out, really sounded good. And,
Mike, I wanted you to talk about your perspective on, or the idea of how you got comfortable. There's this old line that normally comes out of maybe the skiffle player scene or the jam band scene, but it actually applies to jazz mainly, and that's never playing the same song the same way once. And I wanted you to talk about how you got comfortable tapping into that frequency, because that is what in my mind, when I go see live music, when I go see you or Wayne Krantz or whoever, I don't, once you leave the head of the tune, it could be any tune. And I just wanted you to talk to younger cats about sort of learning to play beyond what you know, once you have the rudiments, and then taking off and really playing yourself, or letting the music play you.
One thing I do is I'm always listening and transcribing and checking out different instruments, So, everybody repeats certain lines, for instance, but it's literally impossible if you're improvising. Even if you played the same notes, it's impossible to put them in the same place exactly. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. It's just not going to happen. And of course, the goal is to keep it fresh for yourself and for everybody else. I'll tell you one thing though, and it's important to do that. But at the same time, if something occurs to you that occurred to you the first set, you don't want to just make it different for different's sake. If it's like there and it's in the flow, and you don't say, "Oh shit, I can't play that. I played that lick,"
Right.
That's the main thing is that what you play, you put your heart and soul into it. You make it sound like it's the first time you ever played it, and then the most of the and you go for the most of the vocabulary being different. Like you'll. So the main thing is you gotta. I mean, to me, if you really want to do that, of course, there's ways of doing it with a more limited vocabulary, and then you just leave more space or put the notes in a different rhythm, which is another kind of vocabulary. So you might be playing similar notes like B.B. King, but sometimes it was played just the way he would articulate it. It was different than the other. Down, down, you know, or maybe he went down, you know what I mean?
Totally, yeah.
He didn't have a whole lot of stuff, but it always sounded fresh. So that's part of doing stuff like that, not repeating yourself. But the other thing is trying to have, in a lot of jazz players, and I go for this myself, is to have an extensive vocabulary that you're always working on new and finding new ideas and getting inspired by. I'm just listening to a Joe Henderson record called Four, and it's a live record with Jimmy Cobb and it was the Win Kelly trio. And Joe was young and playing, lots of notes, killing it though. I mean, amazing amount of vocabulary and I cop some of that stuff and try to put it on the guitar.
Yeah, I love it. Love it.
So you get all kinds of different ideas that way, or studying. I was studying this guy Charlie Banakis for years, and he had so much vocabulary and so much because he was taking from some classical composition stuff and putting it into jazz improvisation.
Well, Joe Henderson was picking up gigs with Motown cats in Detroit. I mean, he had a bag of. He was playing soul mixed with pretty sophisticated, jazz, and I just.
Yeah.
I mean, this is a question I have because my daughters and I, we just watched one of these Miles Davis documentaries, and there's this beautiful picture of you on the bandstand in '81 with Miles. I just wanted you to talk, if you even were. I was not aware that in '75 he had a really bad car accident, and I was wondering, like everyone says, oh, he left music or he did everything he needed to do, and then he made this return in '81. But would he have continued on playing if he had not? Because it seems to me he got pretty addicted to pills and things like that, and I just wonder if you think that during that '75 to '81 period he would have continued to play if not for this horrible accident on the West Side Highway, I think it was.
I don't know. I think that didn't really flop. I mean, it didn't exactly. I don't think it made him jump up for joy. And I think somehow somebody told me there's a rumor that, and I don't even know. I talked to him about it. Sometimes Miles would hear the rumors and run with them. But I think he got shot or something. He had a bad hip. He had a hip replacement. No, he stopped for about 7 years, and then he said music was calling him too hard. It was just, and he was bored, and he was, and wanted to still express himself, even though he wasn't in great health at all. And then it got worse, and then it got better again. So he was a strong guy, and then it finally, it's just all the stuff that had gone on with him.
Can you relate to the like the idea that because like you're still listening to sax players and you're still trying to find you're never bored of the music. Could you understand where he was coming from? Obviously, he was a total titan.
I think he was always still listening. When I went over there, he was listening, and Bill Evans, who when he was just coming back, he said he was always listening, even during. So he wasn't bored of music. He just thought there wasn't. He was felt uninspired, I guess, and of course, some of that had to do with health, and some of that had to do with just getting too messed up, I guess, with too much of this and that, and but finally music won. That pull that he wanted to play music, kind of won out. So he came back, and And that happens from time to time. It's I guess it could be kind of, who knows, maybe it's some kind of midlife crisis. People have shit like that happen. Miles ain't any, he's still human, and just because he's an amazing musician doesn't mean he doesn't have that going on.
Totally.
And sometimes people just change their stuff up for a while and then come back to it. So anyway, I'm glad he came back, because I should certainly love the fact that I got to play with him for so many years. I played with him 81 through, I guess, 83, something like that. So, and then he actually started in 80, I'm not sure. And then he called me back, so I went back for about close to a year in 85 or 86, something like that. So
I got a chance to see you in Phoenix, but you were playing with a bunch of cats that were a little bit older than you, a little bit younger. But what was the leadership qualities from Miles that you really have carried through to this day? And how strong is that lineage of the music that we've been talking about? Because Alan Dawson, the Dizzy, there was a period of time when you were coming up when all the original masters were still alive.
Yeah.
So I just want you to talk about what gives you hope, because obviously the clubs are an issue, supply and demand is an issue, but how strong? I mean, Mike, you're part of that lineage now, as an elder statesman.
Well, I mean, I'm just glad to play. I love to play the guitar, and
Sure.
I love to play jazz, of course. I love to play I dig Hendrix at the same time. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I'm into music in general.
Totally.
My wife does a lot of world music, and she that really inspires me. And I'm playing with Richard Bona, for instance, somebody like that. I try to put some of what I would normally do in a different setting with him singing and playing, and I've had opportunities to just get so inspired by different people that I get a chance to play with. Of course, Randy Brecker, sometimes we play together, and that's always a ball. Amazing, such an amazing trumpet player. But I think, first of all, even Dizzy, had his mentors. I mean, he had his
Absolutely.
And so even before then, but so it's been going on. The world of jazz, and of course the world of music's been going on forever, and everybody's still inspired by Bach, and that was a bunch of years ago, and he was amazing, but I think that first of all, I think music goes in a whole bunch of different directions. You can combine stuff, you can play more straight ahead. I'm just talking about pretty much jazz.
Yeah, I dig. Yeah,
you can combine stuff with different different elements, where you can play more traditional, or you can play really modern, really kind of more out stuff, whatever. It's all good, and it's all going in a bunch of different directions at once. And I think that's wonderful. I don't think that's ever going to stop. I mean, jazz is kind of like poetry in some ways.
Explain that.
Which is great.
Yeah.
I mean, poetry is wonderful, and it's a wonderful art form. It's not the kind of thing that most people will delve into and love. You have to be a certain kind of person to kind of get into some of, especially deep. The deeper it gets, I guess it's more difficult to wrap your brain around. T.S. Eliot is not going to be it says, in Oklahoma or something, they ain't going to be quoting from T.S. Eliot. I mean, maybe some people,
yeah.
But it's few and far between. So, and that's kind of where jazz is in some regards, but it's also, Miles had this great way of balancing what he wanted to play and reaching an audience. That balance was amazing. It kept him warm. I mean, the music was always warm, even if it was far out. There was some kind of thing in the bottom, like a bass would stay the same. And then Bitches Brew, all those cats would be playing all kinds of stuff at once.
Exactly.
And the bass would be the anchor. You know what I mean? Or something would just anchor it. Or it would go out and then come back, and kind of play. So he had a way of kind of reaching, being aware that he wanted to communicate his stuff with other people. So it's a great balance because it made him kind of disciplined in a way, in a very loose way, about how to reach people and get them to kind of, dig the music.
Dig it and make it. I mean, make it relatable to.
Yeah.
But still make it hip.
When you think of some of that stuff, it's pretty out there.
It's out.
You know what I mean?
It's out.
Because sometimes it's really, there's a lot of really complicated solos, not from Miles, of course, too, but less so. He was such a singer on the instrument that, but he could play some really out kind of lines and pretty amazing stuff, and it was always just, but the feel was always there. So right away we concentrated on that and the attitude that he wanted. And part of the attitude was, I guess the way he would explain the attitude, to me, he was meaning that's what he wanted to get across to whoever, if they don't know anything about music. He wanted that kind of feeling.
It's the one final question, Mike, in set one. I'd love to do part two down the road, but I just so when I interviewed Joe Chambers, the drummer, he told me something pretty revelatory, considering I was born in '78. He said that Stanley Crouch, the writer, said to him that the real free jazz period was actually the Blue Note stuff that Andrew Hill was doing and Joe Henderson and Bobby Hutcherson in the mid-'60s. And what he said was, and I want to just get your opinion about this, is that, and just for younger cats who are searching for individual sound, he said that they knew about Albert Ayler and Archie Shepp, and they would hear them playing a lot of anguished cries, the lineage of the field calls, but they didn't respect them at that time because they couldn't play changes, they could not back up a singer, and they couldn't keep a gig. And what Stanley was saying, Crouch was basically saying, is that that Blue Note period from the mid-'60s had tradition in it, it had extensions in it, they played through changes. So that, and I just wanted you to talk about Ayler and Shepp, because a lot of cats would say they were just squeaking and squawking, and they weren't really able to hold a gig. And I found that revelatory. It's not music that I'm going to turn to. I'm going to turn to Vince Guaraldi and a drummerless trio before that. But I just wanted you to talk about the validity of playing urgent soul music, even if it's so free that you can't detect what the song is, or et cetera, et cetera.
You know what? I think I actually saw the quote actually on YouTube, because somebody, I think Terry Lynn Carrington, told me that, and then I saw it from Duke Ellington, and he said they asked him what was jazz, and he said jazz is freedom of expression.
Mm-hmm.
That's all. That's all he said. No judgment. No nothing. Jazz is freedom of expression. All that's cool. If it's not your priority, if you can't get it, maybe one of these days. I used to hate sweet potatoes, and now I love them. So, when I was a kid, I couldn't stand that stuff, and now,
acquired taste.
You never know what's gonna, or how you can hear certain energy, a certain kind of, and there's passion behind a lot of that stuff. Sometimes it's up to the listener to find it. A lot of times it's up to the listener to find it. So all of it's good. We all have our priorities. I'm kind of more in the middle of what, I like stuff I like Hendrix. He did a lot of squeaking and squawking.
He certainly did. He certainly did.
Have some great sounds. But my favorite stuff is probably a little bit more in the middle. I'm a big Bill Evans, both of them. I played with Bill Evans, the saxophone player. We were in the band with Miles together. He's amazing. But, I'm talking about Bill Evans, the piano player.
Of course.
And I'm a big Wes Montgomery fan. It's kind of stuff that's in the middle. Of course, Miles and all his extensions of stuff. But he always kept it. I think the difference between him and some of those other, other players is that first of all, he was very Dizzy was his main man. So, and Dizzy had a lot of incisive, precise things about playing over changes. He was really good at that, and Miles got very into that too. And but then sometimes it got further and further looser, but he would still manage to keep it in the middle. Also, he would be able to reach people that they don't like totally really out stuff, but here's a sampling of it from Miles Davis, but something in there was right down the middle.
I love this, dude. Wait, I mean, in your live performances, are there times where you might not, like, to me, the unpredictability of his sets were key. Like, he might not play a solo on a tune. Like,
man, it was moment by moment. he wanted it that way. If it got too tight, and I like sometimes predictability, because within that, then you can,
sure.
You're playing like Train would play with this amazing band with McCoy, and you know what I mean, and Elvin, and it's a different kind of
but I mean, within that,
he would go totally out, sometimes, and it got more and more, like that. But, when he was doing that stuff with Dolphy, I guess, right?
Yep.
And so it got more and more out, but it was it was a kind of a form. There was a general plan. Sometimes Miles stuff, it was really loose, the plan, and when it got a little too solid, he'd change it up, and all of a sudden throw a monkey wrench in the hole, just some kind of weird thing in the middle of the whole thing, just right in the middle of it, just to surprise everybody and keep everybody on their toes, it seemed like. And
let me ask you, do you think that the Duke Ellington line is freedom of expression but in the moment, honest in the moment freedom of expression, not a thing where you have the set list created, but the idea that you can because with Miles, you had to be on your toes, and that kept you totally present.
I think Duke just said, whatever it is, it doesn't have to, it could be in the moment, or it could be something rehearsed,
sure,
and behind a great singer. Every time you sing, you're improvising. The thing is, people improvise all the time. Sure. We are improvising now.
Absolutely.
We are fluent in the English language, and we're having an idea, and you have a question, and you're not thinking, let me see verb conjugation, spelling. It just comes out. And
riffing,
if I understand it, you could say it 3 or 4 different ways. And you could say, okay, well, let me try. Let me explain it more what I'm trying to ask. You know what I mean? You could rephrase, and that's what happens when that's the art of improvisation in some ways. And then you usually have some kind of loose, or sometimes not so loose, subject matter. You know what I mean? Like, for instance, the subject matter for musicians might be the standard that you're playing. So you try to say, okay, well, let me take bits of the, some people think like that. I like to think like this. You take bits of the melody of the tune, and you make sure you don't get too far away from that, at least for a while. So you're quoting from the tune. You have the feel
exactly,
of the tune.
Exactly.
That kind of thing. So you're talking, with and in a group, you're really kind of that's the group subject for the day, you know what I mean? And you're playing for the 10 minutes that you're playing over a standard, and so and then that can get looser and looser, and or whatever tune you're playing, whatever music you're playing, whatever vibe you want to convey. So so it's an amazing kind of just an amazing kind of endless. As you said before, just a voyage. It's a journey. I mean, you don't even come close. I mean, music in general, you don't even come close to perfecting. But all of it's good. I mean, even if it's rehearsed and Barbra Streisand or something, or like, my manager is actually, his father was Billy Eckstein.
Really?
His name is Guy Eckstein.
Oh, my gosh.
Yeah, and that was more songs and
Sure.
singing and Frank Sinatra. Miles told me he got a lot of the phrasing from Frank.
It doesn't
And I know he
surprise me,
picked
man.
up,
That doesn't
I know
surprise
he
me at
picked
all.
up stuff from Billy Eckstine too, because he played in Billy Eckstine's band. So he had a lot of singing in his horn. So he listened to a lot of singers for sure. I remember one time before I went to Berkeley and before I kind of got into jazz, but I heard Roberta Flack because she used to play in Washington D.C. where I grew up, and somebody said Miles came down there, a week before, and he just said it was one of a lot of people in the club. It was called Mr. Henry's, a little jazz club, and there she was, piano singing. She looked so fine. She was really slim in those days, and but amazing singer. And yeah, he came in. He used to listen to singers all the time to get ideas from that. So it doesn't always have to be the spontaneous improvisation thing. That's one thing, but it can also just be a planned out, beautiful, jazz tune or rock tune or whatever. That's all good too. With maybe a little bit of soloing in there, maybe not. My preference, of course, is what I love to do is jam, basically.
Absolutely, dude. Mike's but see, that's the funny. See, that's where you need a big bag of tunes and the ability to lose yourself, because jamming, there's a fine line between jamming and wanking it, and that's the thing that separates the real masters from it, is really
to me I think it's all good. Like I said, it's all good, but to me I would tend to I don't want to take away from anybody who's doing something else, because sometimes I might not understand it, but I think it's important to have the discipline of all, learning the stuff, really doing, I think Schofield said this time, if you want to learn how to play jazz, you got to do the time. It sounds like jazz, but it really is.
Yeah.
It takes a lot. You got to be in a fucking cave.
Oh,
you got to be crazy to learn a little bit, really crazy in love with this stuff, to spend the time to learn all the, to begin to learn all the amazing. I mean, you could do it for years and years and you won't even come close, but you can learn a hell of a lot. But you have to spend hours and hours doing it. I prefer those kind of players, and where it's really, there's a lot of, intelligence, like the way Train would play out. It was always over harmony that he was playing over chords. It was very incisive, Miles was in between. He definitely had that, and he also had just instinct. Sometimes he'd go for a note. So sometimes, some of that other stuff can be, even though it's too out, and not disciplined by, like you're talking about some guys that squeak and squawk more than anything else. Sometimes that can actually inspire somebody else's music who's inside and maybe needs a little bit more of that. So, you just kind of, I think it's all good at the end of the day. Music is all good. We need to complain about Donald Trump or,
absolutely. I mean, Arizona
voting laws, that kind of shit. We need to complain about that.
Well, no, but I think that when I interview Paul Jackson, rest in peace, and Mike Clark, I mean, they were playing at Black Panther rallies with Angela Davis. I mean, music is a huge component to social change, and it's not there right now.
It's there.
I mean, it's just not alongside, but before I let you go, did you wind up at the One Step Down or the Et Cetera ever sitting in with Freddie Hubbard when you were a kid? Was there ever a seminal moment on the bandstand in D.C. before you got to Berkeley?
No, not really in Washington. More rock bands and blues bands, and not so much playing. I was doing gigs, but not so much jazz stuff.
You were doing blues.
I met Roy Buchanan. I had his guitar. I got ripped off in Boston, unfortunately, and I got that from Danny Gatt. Danny got Roy's old guitar. They were tight, and Roy sold him one guitar, and it was Danny's spare. It was an amazing Telecaster.
Oh my God!
And then in Boston, a few years later, somebody ripped me off with a gun. So I said, well, he had a persuasive argument. So I had to give it up. But really sad to do that. But, then somebody else made a copy of that. I was using that for a while, and Yamaha made a copy of that copy. So it's a copy of a copy that I play now, but it's a good, really solid guitar, and they wanted to do a Mike Stern model guitar, so I didn't want to turn them down, that's for sure. And
more blues based. Not you never wound up. Did you go see Freddie or Cannonball or those cats?
I used to listen to go to hear jazz for Cannon. I remember Delvin was playing in D.C. and I used to do that. And I got more into it because my mom was really into it. And she used to play those records. I tried to play along with them in my room, and then I started studying more because they kicked my ass. So I could do that for rock records and blues records, but not so much for jazz records. So that's anyway. So.
Let's put a wrap on it, man. I'd love to do set 2 down the road, man.
All right, beautiful.
All right, man.
I'm glad we finally hooked it up, man. Thanks, brother.
Hey, man, good hang. I'll get this out later, and I look forward to. And by the way, I would love to get a copy of Niche. I've never seen that record, man. Do you have any CD?
I don't have any copies either. They re-released it. I'm not sure about the sound of that record.
Victor Lewis on drums, though. How could that go wrong with Stern?
We used to play this all the time at the Edge 55 bar, too, even back then. I've been playing there off and on for years. And whenever I'm not on the road, I play at that place. So I'm playing there next week. And it's a little tiny club. We played a lot with Victor. But,
I'll figure it out. I just, I'd like to come see you play soon.
Check out the other one, man. I really want you to hear this new one.
Dude, I'm going to check it out right now. High Note Records
I think it's High Note. I think of it, unless I got it wrong, but you'll see. It's just Harvey S. and it's called Going For It, and it's out today. So definitely check it out because I think Alan Dawson. I mean, just to hear him tear it up, is worth everything.
Were there any? Did you have any rehearsals or just hit it live?
We just hit it.
I love this stuff, dude. I'm going to get it right now. Mike, bless you, man.
Right, brother.
Take care, man. Later.
All the best, man. Talk to you.
Talk to you soon.
All right, man.
Peace, man. Later, dude.
Take care, bro.
Bye, man.